Sarah is completely useless in the kitchen, Jake declared, causing the room to grow icy as everyone's eyes shifted toward me. Bolstered by their reaction, Jake's voice grew louder. Have you ever tasted a meal I've made, or are all your meals eaten at your lover's house? I took a deep breath and held up the documents that proved Jake's infidelity. This is no joke, I said firmly, pointing to the evidence in my in-law's hands. My name is Sarah. I'm 35 years old and I've always been somewhat intimidated by assertive men, to the point where I felt afraid. Because of this, I rarely dated and had few interactions with men. As I approached 40, my concerned parents suggested an arranged marriage. Initially, I refused, but given my limited dating experiences and their persistence, I agreed to a few matchmaking sessions. It was at one of these sessions that I met Jake. He was kind, serious, and straightforward. A successful employee at a major company. Despite his imposing physique, he didn't intimidate me at all. The matchmaking went smoothly, and soon we were planning our marriage and meeting his parents. Jake's family was well known in the equestrian world, running their own farm. His father was a man of few words, while his mother was elegant and gentle with charming dimples that appeared when she smiled. Before I knew it, Jake and I were set to marry. As part of the agreement, I became a full-time housewife and left my clerical job at the electronics company. My colleagues teased me about marrying into wealth, and my parents were thrilled. Looking back, I believe that was the peak of my happiness. Jake had assured me that his demanding job would keep him away often, but he promised it would only be for a while. He planned to support the family business after achieving his career goals. I admired his dedication and decided to support him. However, as the years passed, Jake's absences became more frequent and prolonged. I knew he wouldn't be home often, but not to this extent. I waited alone in our condo, a wedding gift from his parents. I wondered if he'd even come home that night. I had only managed to cook for him a few times as his returns were so rare and unpredictable. His business trips left the house empty for days, and he would often dine out, returning home late at night. Despite his late returns, Jake would wake up early and leave without breakfast, which worried me. I was concerned about his health and well-being. One morning, as Jake prepared for the day, I asked, Jake, I really want you to eat healthy meals. Why don't you eat at home? He didn't meet my gaze, busy adjusting his tie. Don't worry, work is just particularly demanding right now, he replied briefly before leaving. Jake worked from early morning until late at night, including weekends and holidays, with frequent business travels. Initially, I wondered if he was avoiding me or if something was wrong between us. His constant absence made me feel almost like I was living alone. Jake owned very few personal items, which added to the feeling of solitude. We hardly spoke, so I knew almost nothing about his interests or preferences. Sometimes, I questioned if I was at fault. I spoke to my parents, but they simply said that it was better for a man to be busy. My few friends also thought it was ideal for a husband to be occupied without deeply considering my feelings. Although Jake managed our finances well and provided for our daily needs, which meant I had no financial worries, this stability only seemed to heighten my anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was to blame for Jake's distance, constantly wondering if I had done something to drag him away. My sense of inadequacy as a wife consumed me, leading me to obsess over cleaning and improving my cooking skills during the rare moments we were together. Whenever Jake noticed my anxious expression, he would reassure me, saying, Sarah, you're doing everything right. Reluctantly, I came to accept that this might be the norm for our marriage. Then, at the end of the year, I received an unexpected call from my father-in-law. His angry voice wooed from the other end of the line, causing me to nearly drop the phone. Sarah, what on earth do you think you're doing? He demanded. Why haven't you attended the family gathering? Confused, I asked, what do you mean? Has something happened? Don't play dumb, he scolded. Why haven't you come to the family gatherings every year? I was taken aback. I had never been informed of any annual family events. I recalled discussing Christmas greetings with Jake, who had mentioned that his father preferred not to have many people in his house and that family gatherings were kept to a minimum. He had also said that it was too hectic with too many relatives, so each year, only Jake would visit his parents with Christmas gifts. You should at least apologize for not participating, his father said sternly, making me tremble. I had always stayed home during Christmas while Jake visited his parents, careful to send warm greetings and messages to maintain proper etiquette. I had suggested making a phone call, but Jake said it was a busy time and that it wasn't necessary. I was relieved to avoid confronting my strict father-in-law, but felt a pang of guilt as I learned that all the relatives gathered for a Christmas party. I apologized profusely over the phone, but my father-in-law left a harsh remark before ending the call. My mind was filled with doubts. What did Jake mean by saying it was no problem if I didn't participate? Why did he convey the wrong information about the family gathering? Did he not want me to attend at all? That night, when Jake returned home, I decided to confront him. I received a call from your father today, I said. He scolded me for not attending the Christmas party. Jake gave a rueful smile, sighed, and replied, "It can be stressful to go where there are many people. Wives usually don't want to visit their in-laws' homes, and I was just considering your feelings." I was surprised by Jake's thoughtfulness. I knew many people dread visiting their spouse's family, as my friends often complain, but that didn't mean they never attended. Despite Jake's insistence that it was okay to skip the gathering, I felt compelled to attend this year and overruled him. The Christmas gathering at his family's home was lavish, with numerous relatives exchanging greetings and gifts. "You finally showed up as a member of the family," my father-in-law said coldly. "It's only natural to participate in such events." Even after I explained that I had been told there was no gathering, his anger didn't subside. "Were you avoiding us because you don't like seeing everyone here?" His intense anger left me speechless, and I had no energy left to argue. The relatives watched from a distance, their silent scrutiny understandable. I chose to endure the situation patiently, but I couldn't forgive Jake for his complete lack of support. He continued to drink silently, and as time went on, his alcohol consumption increased. Meanwhile, everyone came to me to voice their grievances. "Jake says he's never seen you working around the house," they complained. I wanted to retort that Jake was rarely home, and that when I did cook, it was often after he had already eaten out. Each complaint from the relatives felt like a stab in the heart. What kind of negative stories was Jake sharing about me? I couldn't understand why he was painting such a bleak picture. My only response to their harsh words was a stiff apology. "I'm sorry. I will be more mindful from now on," I said, trying to maintain my composure amid their piercing stares. I did my best to assist with the cooking and serving during the Christmas party, and after the cleanup the next day, I was completely exhausted. Jake went straight to work from his parents' house, and we spent the day apart. Returning home, I took a deep breath and reflected on the strange situation. Why had Jake claimed there was no family gathering? Why was he telling people that I neglected household chores? Was this related to his frequent absences? My concerns grew, and I felt I had to investigate further. With time on my hands, I decided to track Jake's behavior, a practice I had seen in detective TV series. Jake left early in the morning, and I discreetly followed him. Knowing where he worked made this task easier, and I felt a thrill from my covert operation, finding it more engaging than staying idle at home. I spent the day lingering in nearby cafes and restaurants, keeping a watchful eye on his office. Jake's activities that day were unremarkable, and he returned to his office in the evening. I continued my surveillance from a cafe with a view of his company. At around 7:00 p.m., Jake left the office. Was he leaving work early today? If he went straight home, he would discover my own absence, so I needed to return quickly. I arrived home before Jake, prepared dinner, and waited for his return. However, he didn't come back until late at night. Something felt off. Determined to uncover the truth, I resolved to monitor Jake's actions again the next day. His routine was almost identical to the previous day. He went to work, left the office for a while, and then returned in the late afternoon. But what happened after that remained unclear. While observing from a different restaurant that evening, around 6:00 p.m., Jake left his office once again. Unlike the previous day, I didn't rush home immediately. I decided to follow Jake discreetly. Instead of heading towards the nearest train station, he walked in the opposite direction. I hesitated but decided to continue following him. He made his way to a lively area filled with hotels. Despite my resolve, I briefly lost sight of him while scanning the surroundings. Suddenly, Jake appeared right in front of me. We both froze, staring at each other in surprise. Jake was the first to speak. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I was at a loss for words. "What are you doing here, Jake? What have you been up to all day?" I was taken aback. I was supposed to be the one investigating him, but now I was the one being questioned. "Go home now," he said. "We'll talk about this later." Being scolded by Jake on the spot was humiliating. I hurried back home. When Jake returned late at night, he bombarded me with startling words. I don't know what you're doing at home, but following me around. Why should I support someone like that? I tried to defend myself. I've been handling the household chores. Do you think you've done your part just by doing a bit of cleaning? From now on, Jake said, you'll have to manage with just $100 for living expenses. I was speechless. How was I supposed to live on just $100? The gas and electricity bills come from my account, and he hadn't contributed a cent to my food. Jake just smirked. Then let me look for a job. I want to work part-time. Jake's lips twisted coldly. Part-time isn't good enough. Find a full-time job and don't neglect the household chores. No matter how much I protested, Jake's determination was unwavering. As a result, I ended up returning to my previous job at the electronics company. My days became a blur of managing both work and household tasks. I had no time for anything else, not even for my brief detective pursuits. Jake became unusually strict with me, criticizing every little mistake. During the short moments we saw each other in the morning, he would complain about fingerprints on the windows, dirt on the stairway, and wrinkles in his shirts. He always found something to criticize before leaving for work. Since I was also working all day, I could only address his complaints at night. The days passed quickly as I juggled my responsibilities, and before I knew it, the end of the year and the Christmas family gathering approached. Jake was adamant that I should not attend. You should stay home. There's no need for you to come to the gathering, he said. Feeling that arguing was futile, I remained silent. Just before he left, Jake delivered a final harsh remark. Someone like you is too disgraceful to introduce to relatives. I was stunned by Jake's biting remarks, unable to understand how he could speak so harshly when I was working tirelessly and managing everything at home. Determined to confront the truth, I decided to attend the Christmas gathering unannounced, feeling it was important for his family to witness his true nature. I tightly gripped the thick envelope that had just arrived as I approached his family's house. Taking a deep breath, I opened the front door and stepped inside. Jake, upon seeing me, looked surprised but quickly masked his reaction, glaring at me while keeping his silence due to the presence of other guests. The relatives' gazes were icy and I could hear their whispered criticisms. I knew they had been deceived by Jake's version of events, but I remained unfazed. Despite their cold stares, I went to the kitchen to help with the food and drinks. As the evening wore on, and Jake drank more, his restraint seemed to loosen, and he began to voice his criticisms more openly. Sarah is useless, he declared. Even when she's in the kitchen, she doesn't cook properly at home. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me, their cold stares now focusing on my direction. Encouraged by the reaction, Jake's criticism grew louder. The meals she makes are terrible, he announced. My father-in-law's sharp gaze zeroed in on me. What does this mean? He demanded sternly. Isn't this highly inappropriate for Jake's wife? Feeling the weight of the moment and the collective attention of the relatives, I decided it was time to stand my ground. I stepped forward and confronted Jake directly. Have you ever actually eaten the food I've made? Aren't all your meals at your lover's place? I challenged. My father-in-law's mouth dropped open in shock, and the room was filled with stunned silence. Only Jake seemed to panic, trying to salvage the situation. Sarah, why are you making up such lies just because you're being criticized? He stammered. Jake tried to defend himself to his father. Dad, I don't have a mistress, he insisted, hoping his father would take his word over mine. But my father-in-law seemed torn, wanting to believe Jake. Are you out of your mind, making up stories like this all of a sudden? Jake said, dismissing my claims. But the accusation of Jake having a mistress wasn't just a passing joke. It was a serious matter. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, handing the documents inside to my father-in-law. Jake, continuing his barrage of insults, demanded, apologize right now. If you do, I might overlook the fact that you lied. The relatives, seemingly convinced that Jake was innocent, maintained their cold stares toward me. As my father-in-law and mother-in-law carefully examined the documents, I braced myself. The papers were a detailed report from a private investigator I had hired after my own amateur sleuthing revealed troubling patterns in Jake's behavior. The investigation confirmed my fears. Jake was indeed having an affair. While I struggled to manage on $100 a month, balancing a full-time job and household duties, Jake was living comfortably with his mistress, spending most of his time at her place and even dining there daily. I had stumbled upon Jake in a bustling district lined with hotels, just as he was about to meet his mistress. With a firm voice, I declared, "This is no joke. Here's the evidence." I pointed to the documents in the hands of my in-laws. Murmurs of disbelief swept through the relatives. "Jake, is this true? Explain yourself," they demanded. The father-in-law and mother-in-law scrutinized the report, flipping through the pages. Jake, sweat forming on his brow, vehemently denied the accusations. "No, that can't be. I don't have a mistress," he protested. The documents contained numerous photos, including shots of Jake entering an apartment that wasn't ours, holding hands with an unknown woman. Other images showed him selecting jewelry with her, enjoying wine at a trendy restaurant, and shopping for groceries. In every photo, Jake's carefree smile was evident. I confronted him directly. "You always talked about how hard you were working. Is this how you spent your time?" Jake's face drained of color as he struggled to find words, clearly caught off guard by the overwhelming evidence. I continued, my voice rising with anger. "Why did you lie about not wanting to see the relatives or about the food tasting bad? Why distort the truth until the very end?" Jake persisted in trying to twist the facts, and I was deeply disappointed by his reaction. The room fell silent during our heated exchange. Then, my mother-in-law's sharp voice cut through the tension. "Jake, what on earth are you thinking?" Her voice, usually calm and composed, was now harsh and fierce. Even Jake seemed taken aback by her authoritative tone. She turned to me, her expression intense. "Are you trying to claim that all this evidence is false? Explain yourself properly." Her sudden shift from calm to furious was both frightening and compelling. The relatives stood silent, clearly intimidated by her presence. Jake, kneeling, began to speak in a subdued voice. "I've been involved with this woman since before our marriage. We met in a shop in New York." Murmurs of disbelief spread among the relatives as both my father-in-law and mother-in-law glared at Jake, their expressions stern. Jake's eyes were wet with tears, and droplets fell to the floor. "I thought I could just marry someone suitable and live separately." "That suitable person you're referring to is me," I interjected. Jake bowed deeply. "I'm sorry. I thought you weren't interested in marriage, so as long as I provided money, it would be fine. I was wrong. I want to marry her. A life without love or affection with you wasn't what I wanted. I needed a way out." I was stunned by his admission. "Do you realize how incredibly selfish you're being right now?" Jake's voice trembled. "I'm truly sorry. I thought I'd only be considered an adult if I got married, and I thought once married, I wouldn't face nagging." He had assumed that while his parents were strict about marriage, they wouldn't interfere with a subsequent remarriage. He wanted to divorce first, so he could be open about his affair, and then remarry without issue, shifting the blame onto me while portraying himself as the victim. Jake's decision to set the monthly allowance to $100 was clearly meant to hinder my investigation into his affair. With so little money, I would have had no means to dig further, and taking a full-time job would only reduce my time for probing. However, Jake hadn't anticipated that I might hire a private detective. His short-sighted actions led to this moment of public humiliation. Infidelity was always condemned in our family, and Jake's betrayal of me after all my efforts was unforgivable. My mother-in-law's anger was palpable. Her temples bulged with rage as she confronted him. Jake, sobbing and sniffling, pressed his face to the floor, his tears and runny nose mixing in a pitiable display. "You are a disgrace to this family," my mother-in-law declared. "From now on, you are to sever all ties with us." The shock among the relatives was evident. It was clear that her word was final, and the father-in-law nodded in quiet agreement. There was no longer a place for Jake in the family. His infidelity and lies had led to his disarmament. Jake stumbled to his feet and left the room in tears. After he departed, my mother-in-law approached me, taking my hand with a firm grip and bowing her head. "Sarah, I am so sorry for Jake's unforgivable behavior. Please divorce him," she pleaded. The father-in-law also expressed his regret. "We fully trusted Jake and never imagined he could do such a thing. I deeply apologize for accusing you unjustly and shouting at you," he said. Though usually reticent and stern, he was remarkable in his ability to admit mistakes and apologize. The mother-in-law, holding back tears, continued to support me, revealing her strength as the backbone of the family. Jake's behavior was a stark contrast to the values instilled by such wonderful parents. Eventually, I reconciled with my in-laws, and the divorce proceedings with Jake were swiftly finalized. As Jake had hoped, once disowned by the family, he lost his prestigious family backing. His career was affected, he was removed from any path to promotion and now worked as an ordinary employee with significantly reduced income. His mistress also left him abruptly, ending their relationship. I received a fair division of assets from Jake, along with a generous amount from his family, and with the unexpected money, I enjoy occasional trips abroad. I continue to live comfortably in the marital flat, which I was allowed to use freely. Jake's presence is barely felt, and I lead a relaxed life. Despite the scandal, I've managed to return to work and now have a stable income, securing my future. I still occasionally communicate with my in-laws and am even invited to family gatherings at Christmas, though I politely decline.